Good afternoon, and thank you for taking some time out of your day and having your lunch with me. My name is Bill Bray, ATRA Senior Research Technician, F35 Internal Webinar. Welcome, everyone. Today's presentation is sponsored by CX, your source for engineered solutions.
Seal Aftermarket Products engineers and manufactures Toledo Transkit with the rebuilder in mind, including everything you need to get it done right. Toledo Transkit is the #1 choice of installers because of all the intensive research and development that goes into each component in every kit. Like re-engineered valve body gaskets, preventing PPC damage by eliminating the shredding you get from original equipment, plus all of the extra essentials that are included, like spring and screen filters that should be changed at overhaul. Toledo Transkit even includes loose valve body gaskets that fit all 19 bonded separator plates. At Seal Aftermarket Products, we don't just make kits, we make kits better. Ask for Toledo Transkit by name.
Okay, if you have any questions or comments about today's presentation, send your emails to webinars@atra.com. Any questions that you may have during the webinar today, feel free to text them in, and we will do our best to get those questions answered. Webinar schedule. Welcome to the new guys, welcome back to the regulars. And we've got a full program through the end of the year for you guys to catch this training while you're grabbing a sandwich. So we appreciate you spending your lunchtime here with us today. It's never too early to pencil in October 7th through the 30th. This year it's at Paris, Las Vegas, new hotel, new venue. Expo 2016, it should be a great show, so we look forward to seeing you all there. Now, in the intro webinar, we looked at applications and some problem areas. In this webinar, we're going to look into the unit, tear the gear train apart, and look at some areas that we really need to focus on. So let's start by getting the valve body off in. We're back on with the valve body. Very important that you line up the internal mode switch properly. This can lead to a no reverse after rebuild. Put the thing together, you did a great job rebuilding it, you got in a hurry, you got a phone call, you got distracted, and it ends up looking like the picture on the right hand side of your screen. Very critical to make sure that that fork is positioned underneath that the roller comes down in the middle of that fork. So don't get in a hurry and that, because you'll have no reverse after overhaul. Okay, we got our valve body off. Got a couple of seals in the case. Bypass cooler, the valve so the spring faces up. Bonded gaskets, the gaskets are coming in with you don't have to throw the bonded gasket away. You can remove the gasket, and the kits are coming with the overhaul kit, as are the case seals as well. And over here, I'm pointing this out because this is one of the big differences between the 6T40 and the 6F35N. 6T40 has a wiring loom that runs through the case and plugs into the Tecum. Of course, this has an external computer, so we don't need that setup. Here, just as the 6T40, the 675, same exact pressure, air pressure test locations. The forward, overdrive, intermediate, direct, those are all Ford names for the clutch. The GM names are a little more practical with the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 2, 6, etc. They call it by the clutch. They call the clutch by when it is applied. Okay, now I have and in the last hour when I did it, it didn't turn out too well. So, meaning that it was here and see how it goes. All right, Ivan. Is that good or bad? Hold on, I want to check out the exhaust. No, go ahead. That is fucking awesome. Wait, hold on, here. Woo-hoo-hoo. Okay, so I'm not sure how that showed up on your screen. It shows up okay over here. But what we're seeing is the engine move violently back and forth front to back. And what's happening is the clutches are violently coming off and on because the solenoid regulator valve, which I've circled here in this frame, is worn out. Okay, what you can do is, and I covered this, and you can measure the inside bore and you can see the wear. A lot of times you can see that the valve is worn out just by looking down into the bore, or you can do some vacuum testing right above the valve. However, that being said, we have a new valve body part number that comes with a bond and plate. Sir asked, was this on engagement? Yes, absolutely. It was definitely on engagement. They're putting, and that was sitting at idle, believe it or not. They weren't getting after the gas. This was a case where they just put it into gear and it rocks it violently back and forth. And the one thing I want to caution you on is to not do that. If it comes in doing that, stop doing that. Or if you have it after rebuild and you didn't change the valve body, you're going to, I've talked to guys that have had this happen before, and it will break AC lines. I mean, it's so violent, tears stuff up. So thank you for that, Dana. There are replacement valves, and but what you can do is go to the dealer and get a dealer valve body. They run about 80 bucks. And here's the part number, everyone. So get a pencil out, grab a piece of paper. I'm going to give you a part number, which I'll probably put up in the next show. But for now, I just have to write it down. That is C as in Charlie, V as in Victor, 6, Z as in dash 7, A as in Alpha, 1, 0, 0, dash A as in Alpha. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. C, V dash 7, A, 1, 0, 0, dash B. That's the Ford part number for original equipment valve body. This casting right here that you're looking up and on your screen, and it comes with a bonded plate. Okay, so let's get into taking this thing apart. The difference between the 6F35 and the 6T40, at this area right here is the 6T40 has a gasket, and the 6F35 uses a sealer at this area, and it's pretty stubborn to get apart. So we do have one test point, one pry point on the case, which we're showing right here. You do not want to get a wedge in between the two aluminum surfaces because it will tear the aluminum surfaces up. Once you are using your big screwdriver right here, you can pry up this end of the case and slowly work your way around with the screwdriver, and it'll pop up and off of there. So you don't want to pry the case halves apart by using wedges in between the two halves. So now we got the case. We're going to bring the case up, the bell housing up off to the side, up and off, and put it off to the side. It's very critical that you watch these two bearings because they can stick to the bell housing and drop off and fall in that hole in the bench where we do anything once we drop it, right? So you want to be just aware that these bearings may stick. We can see another major difference between this. We have a bearing up here for the 6F, and the 6T has a large round bearing here. So that's the big difference in the differentials. So I'm going to take that up and out the side. And before we take it any further, we're going to take off our chain snubber and reservoir. Well, there is an update that you want to know about, and it's for a hoot noise at low speeds. This is the old reservoir with a bracket and the yellow plastic. The black is the updated part. I feel that you should use one of these every time you go through the unit to prevent those hoot noises and take the slack out of the chain. Keeps the chain from bouncing all over the place. So it's a good idea to change that. Here's another difference in the 6T differential bearing. The sun gear thrust bearing on a 6F is captured. You can see here it's going to stay with it. The 6T not captured comes right up and out of there, which makes the sun gears two different sizes. Okay. Now that we've got the differential out of the way, there's enough slack in the chain to remove the driven gear and its support bearing. Be sure and get the washer off so we don't lose that at the clip into the drive gear. And now we've got the chain up and off of there, and we can inspect for a worn chain. Okay, here's our output shaft removed, our output shaft or gear, as it were, removed, and our small parts as well. The park pawl has to come out very simply, just lifts up out of the case. This is the metallic baffle we can see up in the upper left hand in the case, and in the lower picture we show it out of the case. Whereas the 6T has a plastic piece right there. So you want to make sure this part's out of the side and out of the way. So we're going to keep removing the guts. The front sun gear comes up and out of there. Then the front planet lifts out. We've got a couple of support bearings here in the center planet. This is a large bearing that fits down inside the center planet. and there's another bearing down in here with the skirt on it. That's the number 7 thrust, and the skirt faces up. It sits down on the sun gear. The important part is the skirt faces up. Now we can lift the center support, the center planet and the ring gear out, set it aside, and then finally the center planet gear. And the thing that's notable about that sun gear is that it can go either way. There's no upside or downside to that bearing. And now that's as far as we can go without the center support, removing the center support. So let's get after that right now. This is the, on the left-hand side, this is the forward clutch pressure plate with the retaining snap ring. This is a beveled snap ring. Almost I forgot the word there. A beveled snap ring. It faces, the flat side faces down, bevel faces up. The one thing the Ford factory manual wants you to do is to put the opening to the front of the transmission. And as we did, the front is on the right-hand side, or where the valve body casting is. So that's why the opening is over towards what they call the front. Now up come the forward clutches. This on the right-hand upper picture here, that's the forward clutch pack facing down. I got it flipped over, the pressure plate and the steel plates and clutches here. And notice we have the wave spring down in the case. Well, when I first took this up and out of here, and I took it over and I took it to the bench and I wanted to put it back together again, I had to spin this cushion plate around and around and back and flip it over, and I'm like, which way does this thing go in here? I finally got it in there, and I said, well, that's ridiculous, and there's got to be a faster way. So what I did was I got it in the correct position, and I put it towards my thumb. As I got it up and out of the case, I put my thumb where you see that grind mark is, and I took it out, picked it up out of the case, walked it over to the grinder, made a grind mark in it, came back over and put it back in and shot a picture of it, and I said, that's the way that's done. Put a grind mark in there because you're wasting time. It's frustrating to sit there and flip it around and flip it over, and it's got to go some way. What I'm doing here, guys, is we're saving time. This is just a time saver. You see the grind marks. Oh, easy. Boom. Done. Now you can flip it in. And these steels and the pressure plate only go in one way, and there's a space right here in all of them. Makes it much more easier. So do yourself a favor for reassembly and make the grind mark so it goes back together easier. So here we brought the long leg, we brought the center support up and out of the case now. It was interesting in the 6T40 I showed bringing this whole, grabbing the Planetary, grabbing the sun gear, and the whole thing comes up and out of the case. I could not get this to do this. This center support's a pretty tight fit in the case. I was unable to bring up the whole shoot match. So we continue on down into the unit, and the number 6 and 7 thrust washers on top of the low inverse planet. And then we've got the planet coming up and out of the case right here. Once again, we've got another clutch pack down here. This is the L&R clutch pack, and the cushion springs on top because it goes against the piston. Same situation. You lift that up and out of the case, turn on the grinder and hit it with the grinder and mark so that when you go back together with this thing, you're not fiddling about with it, you're just putting it down into the case and moving on. Once again, this is on the right, you can see the feed holes for the clutches and the grind mark to mark the cushion spring. So up comes the one-way clutch. This is a really tight fit as well. Kit Hi, Kit. Has there been a failure trend on that planet? On the low inverse planet? Not we've seen yet. Not that we've seen yet. Nobody's made any noise about that failure. Okay, so here comes the intermediate clutches. Pretty straightforward. The clutches come up because they've got blind splines in the sun gear. And then finally the pressure plate and cushion spring come up last. Now we can direct overdrive, input shaft out, just lift it up and out. And that the number one thrust bearing comes out with the flat side facing up. So I think you should take the clutch, it's called the clutch support tower, out of the case every time. Easier to work with the sealing rings, easier to inspect. This one's hammered. We got huge grooves where the bushing rides in the overdrive drum. Both of them are hammered, so this part is no good, needs to be replaced. And it's easier to change the sealing rings. Okay, here we've got the factory special tools for to replace the sealing ring. The part numbers up here on your screen, you want to write that down. I did not, in the original handout. This part number 307578 is not in your material. Jose asks, are the 6T40 and 6F35 one-way clutches the same? My answer to you, Jose, is I'm not sure. I have both of them, which I could probably get up from my desk and go get right now, but I need to do a side-by-side comparison on that. If they are the same, it'll be one of the few parts that are interchangeable. So I'm going to have to say, my instinct says no, but I haven't compared them. So stay tuned for that, Jose. Let's see. Oh, about this special tool. I got this one on eBay for 120 bucks. And I went and looked on eBay, and I think it was the last one that was on eBay. However, you Google Ford and this part number, you can find another supplier. It runs about 250 bucks. The good news is it works on the 6F35, 50, the 6T40, and 70. So it works over a wide range of units. And if that's not in your program, well, then you can go down to O'Reilly's local parts house and pick up a small engine piston ring compressing tool. And what you can do is use your scribe, your 90-degree scribe, and work your O-rings down onto the center, down onto the power support, and work it down onto the center, onto the support here, and compress it with this tool right here. This is a pretty slick way to do it. About 14 parts, 14 bucks, and you can have it today. Okay, coming up in the next frame, I have a video demonstrating how to use the tool. Okay, here we have the input shaft support for the 6T40E, and we're going to install new sealing rings on this. These are solid sealing rings, so there's a couple different methods, and you can use the scribe to work to snap the sealing ring down on in here, and then we can use a small ring piston ring compressor that we got at our parts store here. That device, it's effective. It costs about 14 bucks. It's a cheap method to put the rings on there and size them down. The other way to do it is to go out and factory tool here, part number 307578-2, and this was bought on eBay for about 120 bucks. It's a really nice tool. Let's take a look at how that works. This is our sizer tool that you can see we've got it adjusted right to the next ring to be installed. So we're going to take the ring, put it on our tool here, and this is pretty cool the way this thing works. It's fitted just so that it goes down to the next ring groove, so that we just push it straight on down and it snaps into place. So now we've got our ceiling rings on. Boy, these things are pretty distorted. So we're going to use the sizing tool. We're going to carefully put the ring into the tool, because the thing is so distorted that it'll pop out of the groove. So we might have to help it in there into the groove a little bit. Like I said, that ring really gets distorted. We go through the process here. So we work it down in there. Now it's ready to be used. Let's push it back all the way down. You can even set this aside while you're building other components. Now we press that back out of there. You can see our rings are in good shape and ready to be installed into the unit. Okay, so that's how the sizing tool works. Interesting comment from Kit Lindsay. You make your own tools out of UHMW. What is UHMW? You use it make it on a lathe? Not sure what that is. So making your own tools, I love making my own tools as well, as we'll see here in a bit. Oh, it's plastic. Okay. Thank you, Kip. Okay, low and reverse piston setup. There's some things we need to pay attention to here, or else things are going to go sideways. First of all, the opening of the snap ring, much like the tapered snap ring up on top, the opening wants to go towards the valve body or front of the transmission. In this case, that's off to our right at the 3 o'clock position, the 12 o'clock position straight up here. And that becomes important when we look at the installation of the piston up closely. There is a bleed hole in the piston that must go at the 12 o'clock position. Now, in this picture, in the circle on the right, this is an extremely close-up picture of the piston. So that hole looks rather large in that picture when it's not. I would think that that's about a 25 thousandths hole. It's very, very small. Well, to help the installation and be in the correct position, they've added tabs such that it only goes in this location. If you were to turn this spring around and try and fit these tabs anywhere else but right here, it won't go. What they have is a wider notch right here for on the piston to fit these two tabs on the spring, so it goes together in that correct position. So do not mess with getting that in the wrong position. Plus, I doubt you'll be able to, because it won't fit. Anyways, this is another one of those cases where the factory book shows a special tool to compress this ring. Really, it's not necessary. Just a push down with a screwdriver and a twist, and we can work the snap ring all into the groove all the way around just by simply pushing down and twisting on the snap ring, so the special tool isn't really necessary. Okay, the main case, axle bushing. Superior transmission came up Superior Transmission Parts came up with a fix for this problem, because the root cause repeated axle rings for both the 60 and the 6F were lack of support at the bushing. So Bob White and his guys over at Superior came up with this wider bushing that they relieved the bushing to make way for the lube, and they came out with a really nice installation removal tool, such that when this thing's in the car, you can effectively do this repair with the unit in the car and not have to remove the transmission to fetch the bearing out of there. Pretty great setup, and we recommend that you use this wider bushing to prevent those repeated axle seal leaks. Here's our one-way clutch disassembled. The interesting thing to note here is that it's only got 3 elements, which was pretty strange. You know, you thought, well, there'd be elements all the way around this place. Not so much. We have one here, and one back over here. It's very simple to set this down. These 3 won't fly out unless you put too much pressure on them. And so you carefully set it down in, compress the little return, and then it'll go back down in here quite. Back to Jose's question, I haven't had the 6T40 apart, but and will it interchange? You know, probably not, because I'm sure the lugs on the case are going to be different. That would be the one big distinction. But we do want to take these apart to clean out any excess metal, any extra metal that may want to found its way into the one-way clutch. And don't lose the tiny little springs either. This is just a comparison on this slide. Is just a comparison between the two. They function identically the same, and they are not interchangeable in any way, shape, or form. You can see the castings are much different. They all function the same. They all have the same passages. However, that being said, they're not interchangeable. You see on the right, on the left, we've got a crescent. Here we've got the gear rotor design. Of course, the dot always faces up on the inner gear here as well. Here's a look at a blow apart of the valves. Always inspect these valves for wear. Vacuum check them where you can. Always inspect the pocket for wear as well. This particular pump that I tore down had way too much side clearance, was worn out, and the pocket was worn out. This pump is going to be very careful and inspect those for wear. On the left, here we have the stator, and what's important to notice here, we're always, of course, going to replace the seal, and we want to carefully inspect this bushing, measure its inside diameter, write that down, and then measure the shaft, the input shaft, because this area between this bushing and this seal seals up the converter apply oil. And we do not want any wear. If more than 1.5 and that bushing's worn out, 1.5 thousandths bushing's worn out. Anything over that, it's going to have to be replaced. And if it is that worn, it could lead to TCC slip codes after rebuild. So it's very critical to check the wear on that bushing. Here's our clutch clearances. I love the special tools that these guys come up with at the factory level. I know I don't have this big crossbar and this micrometer depth gauge set up in my toolbox. Maybe you do, but I don't. But I came up with a different method a little bit more simpler method, more practical way to do things. What we can do to check our L&R clearance is here we've got the complete clutch pack stacked up on the bench, and we're simply checking the distance from the top of the leg to the face of the pressure plate. And boy, they give you quite a spread here, 15 thousandths to 78 thousandths clutch clearance. And here, ours falls right in there at 64 thousandths. Here we have the forward clutch clearance, doing the same measurements. On the left, it shows fancy dial indicator. I know I don't have one of those dial indicators that mount to the case like that. I could probably figure something out, maybe bolt my magnetic base there to a plate or something fancy like that. Well, no, that's not very practical either. So here I am with the caliper. The spread we have a 70 thousandths spread here, and this fits right in there at 66. And keep in mind, none of these adjustments are adjustable. Okay, I want you guys to focus in on this one. The center port has been updated. It has a dish beneath the snap ring. What's happening is the snap rings are popping out of the groove. I should have put a part number in there. I did have a part number somewhere. I'll get that out to you if you request it for me. But the one you would buy from the Ford dealer is the updated design. And what happens is it has intermittent harsh engagements and harsh downshifts from fifth gear. That's what this fixes. And what's happening is the snap ring was popping out of the original design on the left. So what they did was they took what I call a dish type washer, and when it's in its at rest position, it's captured the snap ring underneath so it can't pop out. Well, because of that, I knew that we were going to have to push the whole spring down evenly to get that dish to come out evenly so we could remove that snap ring. Well, on the left shows Ford's special tool and being in the press. Well, I don't have Ford's special tool, and I hate taking things to the press. So here's my special tool on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, and I walked around. I'll provide that part number here for you in just a second, Jim Rollins. The box is sitting about 3 feet away from where I'm at right now. I'll hop up and get that part number for you. But this is the special tool that I came up with. You know, so many oftentimes we're not going to buy the factory tool. What we're going to do is walk around with this center support and find a tool that fits our application. And sure enough, L60E Sunshell fit perfectly. It even had a nice opening here that I could get to the snap ring to push this down nice and evenly, and what that does is it lowers down the dish so we can get that apart. And this is identical on both sides. Okay guys, pencil ready? Here comes the part number for that updated center support. That's then dog, G as in golf, 9, Z as in zebra, dash 7A as in alpha, 130 dash B as in bravo. One more time, D, G, Z, dash 7 A130B as in Bravo. And I would be inclined to change that every time. Okay, just a couple things on the OD direct drum here. The hub is captured by the shaft, so we've got to remove the snap ring and the shaft. And once we pull this out, we flip this over and only press this down till it makes the contact. You don't want to crack this. If you do, that makes the housing a paperweight. So just enough to expose that snap ring to get that snap ring out. And lastly, we want to hear a little bit of a difference here in the way that the retaining snap ring here, when we take the piston and the housing apart on the 6T40, it exposes this snap ring, this retaining snap ring. This snap ring is captured in a groove on this plate, so you need to pinch the ends together to compress it into the aluminum housing, and once you do, that'll fall away. And you'll be able to remove the snap ring and take the clutches off the drum. We have the clutch clearances for you, and as with all the clearances in this unit, if the factory says if they're not within specs, replace the clutch pack. Oh, a couple more things. Here we are checking the intermediate clutch clearance with our fancy tool, making the measurements. I don't have a fancy tool, I have a set of calipers. All we're doing is measuring from the friction plate, friction face to the case, come up with 66 thousandths. They give us almost 100 thousandths to play with. So we're right in there. All right. Thank you for attending this afternoon. Thank you for your great questions and comments. Today's presentation was presented by Seal Aftermarket Products, your source for service engineered solutions. And if there are no further questions, any further questions? Jim Rollins says Transtar has the support. Would that be the updated support, Jim Rollins? And thank you very much, Kit. And yes, okay, thank you, Jim. Alrighty then, thank you very much for attending. My name is Bill Brayton. Please enjoy the rest of your day.